He says, 6 days shall work be done. Some of you need to remember that. Most people in public office need to hear that. It says, 6 days shall work be done. But the seventh day is a day of solemn rest, a holy convocation. You shall do no work on it, for it is the Sabbath of the Lord. It is the Sabbath of who?
The Lord.
So the feast belongs to who?
The Lord.
And the Sabbath belongs to who?
The Lord.
But in John chapter 5, we now have a feast of the Jews, and we have a problem because Jesus did something he wasn't supposed to do based on the law of the Pharisees on the Sabbath day. Here's the point. It wasn't their day. It was God's day. It didn't belong to men on earth. It belonged to the God who created heaven and earth. The feast didn't belong to the Jewish people. The feast belonged to the Lord, and he invited those who believed in him to participate. This is not something that a council of Pharisees, along with the Sanhedrin and the Sadducees and the scribes and the rabbis and the Levites, all sat down and decided, here's the rules. Here's when it starts. Here's when it ends. Here's what you can wear. Here's what you can't wear. Here's what you can say. Here's what you can't go. Here's what you can touch. Here's what you can't touch. Here's what you wash when you touch this. Here's what you take off when you do this. Here's what you burn if she walks in. And you say, that sounds ridiculous. Religion and rules always are. We're not called to religious rules. We're called into a relationship with Jesus Christ. Certain things just don't mix. Man-made works and the grace of God are like oil and water. They'll never get together because Ephesians says it is by grace. That's God's grace that you have been saved. Not of yourself. That's the truth. Nobody did anything to deserve the gift of salvation that God gave us through his only begotten Son. Ephesians says it is by grace that you have been saved, not of yourself, that any man could boast. None of us can stand here today and say, you didn't deserve it, but I did. We're all in the same boat. Leviticus 23, God says it's my feast. But after centuries of making rules and regulations and telling people what they could and couldn't do and how they could and couldn't do it, suddenly it no longer looks like the feast that God designed. Now it's the feast of the Jews. John didn't get it wrong. What John was saying is that man had so twisted it and so turned it and so taken text out of context and so said you should and you should not, that all of a sudden you could no longer recognize what God intended for it to be.